Hello, welcome to Autistic Chess Openings. We're covering the Scotch Gambit as white, line number 12. All right, let's summarize today's line. Okay, we're covering the Bishop E7 response to the Scotch Gambit. That is the sixth most common response. It happens 7% of the time, and this is our first time covering it. They go Bishop E7. We're going to strike with C3. This is a less common response, and it is beautiful and nasty, and they have to violate opening principles in order to not lose to it or get in a really bad position. So we're going to use this very subtle attack of C3. You'll see how nasty it is later. All right, so we hit C3. And the most common response, all three of these responses are bad. They need to go knight a5 here. That only happens 4% of the time, and move the same piece twice in the opening. Hardly anyone does that. So, and even if they do, we only give a tiny bit of score back, and so it's a really good way to go. So c3. We're not risking much. They take. That's the most common response. Now, don't be tempted by queen d5, threatening checkmate on f7, which they have to block by going knight h6, which we can then capture with bishop takes h6, and then they have to castle to stop the checkmate on f7. It looks sweet, but it's not. The moves are not that difficult for black to find, and they end up not. We end up with a position that's way less powerful than what we're going to do. Don't do queen d5 here. Do knight takes c3. It's way better. Trust me. You hit with knight takes c3. Now they have only one good move, and it's again to move the same piece twice, bishop b4. They only do that 1% of the time. They have to, again, violating opening principles. People don't do that usually. So we bring that knight out, and we are still threatening queen d5, which they defend with either d6 or knight f6. Today we're covering d6. So they go d6. Now our queen d5 fails to bishop e6, but we have something else in mind. Queen b3. Nasty, nasty, nasty. They cannot defend f7. There's no good way to defend f7, and the best defense they got is poor. Knight a5. That happens 41% of the time. That's what we're going to prepare for today. They go knight a5 to try and stop this nastiness on f7. We take anyway. They can't go to d7 or we'll checkmate them in 2, so they have to go to f8. As soon as they step aside, we've now ruined their chances of castling, and now we got that gambit pawn back. That wasn't really a gambit. The Scotch Gambit's not really a gambit. But anyway, queen d1. We back off. This line is so full of maneuvering and finesse. It's really a joy to behold. So we let them take the bishop, and their only good move is to take the bishop. So they take the bishop, and we go queen d5 check. All right, and now they block. They follow opening principles. Develop a piece, block the check, take the knight. Now, take a look at this. Again, they've moved both the bishops. They haven't castled. There's no way to castle. Get the knight out and get the rook out is their next thing that they're honing in on. And these are drilled into people. Okay, so knight f6 is the only knight move available, except knight h6 and a knight on the rim is dim, is what we've always heard. So knight f6, 43% of the time our opponent's playing knight f6, and these are players rated 1888 and on average. So they play knight f6, knight g5, check. We win the bishop outright immediately. And get this, they've got 4 moves that they can move their king to, and they're all awful except king g8 is their best one, and that one's 35% of the time. These others they're doing a fair amount of the time too. 33% of the time they go king g6, and I'll show you how to shut that down hard. King e8, 27% of the time. We'll punish that one too. We'll go up a whole rook instead of just a bishop. King f8 loses the queen immediately, and they do that 5% of the time. And these are not all low rated players. 1960, 1933, 1812. This is beautiful. They end up g8 in the corner. We get the bishop for free. Now we're up a bishop, we're up a knight. We have 2 knights and a bishop against their bishop and knight. And now queen d7 is almost guaranteed. 92% of the time out of 26 games is a good enough pool. And look at some of these high ratings in here. They did not see that knight check. They thought it was covered by their bishops, and then they just fell into develop the knight, and we punish them for it. So now they go queen d7 92% of the time. Do not be tempted by knight takes c7 here because of b6. Okay, what we're going to do instead is we're going to back the knight off to f4. That is the top engine move and the best move here. So, and that is a judgment call on my part, which is true of all of these openings. So they go b6 at this point. There's only 5 games here. b6 is 2 out of 5, 40% of the time. We'll get a bigger sample later if we all use this line to kick people's butts, but b6 is probably going to be a common move, even if it ends up not being the most common. So we're going to include this on our line today. They go b6, and now I spent a lot of time finding that queen b4 is the best way to end it. And I'll show you continuations from there that they might do. We have no game, so we don't know what's common here. But queen b4, though counterintuitive as it is, putting ourselves on the dark squares when their light squares are so weak, they don't have a light squared bishop, and our knights cover light squares, it is still the best move on the board in my opinion. So we'll go through the line and see that. All right, so there's the summary. Now let's get into the explanation here. All right, Scotch Gambit's on the board. They go bishop e7. Let's back up a minute and pull up my chess mapper over here. This is my custom program that uses Stockfish 18 behind the scenes and has a fleet of old computers. I would like newer ones. A fleet of old computers mapping chess positions 24/7. Around the clock, 365 days a year, and I've got about 250,000 positions mapped so far, filling in the evaluation. So here's this Scotch Gambit position. Here's all the scores of all the legal moves that our opponent can play, and it's ranked by how good they are. Since our opponent is playing black, a positive score it means we're ahead, a negative score means they're ahead. And so the best move for black is to keep our score low. So the top moves on the top have our scores low. So let's find bishop e7. It's right there. Okay, it is not colored black. I can color it black if I want, because it's not common. I define common as 10% or greater, and bishop to e7 is only 7% of the time, so it's grayed out. I can still click it though, so I click it and go in, and here's all the moves and their scores from that position, recalculated again to a depth of 200 million nodes, like 200 million positions off the current position, which is, I would like more. It's not accurate enough, but it's good enough as long as I explore everything that's even remotely good. All right, so here we are. They go bishop e7. Here's our top responses. Castling, knight takes d4, and c3. Okay, everything else is much worse. Hang on a minute. Apologize for that, I have a cold. All right, so I can only hold it for so long. All right, so I went down the castle line. I looked at their common responses, these two here. I looked at each of them and the scores that ensue from that come out of that. And then I looked at this one and their scores. And then if they play that move or that move or that move, here's my scores. And so I looked at it, you know, a few plies deep, a few half moves deep, and they don't look anywhere near as good as c3. c3 is awesome. It looks a little lower, and that's because they need to find knight to a5. And if they do find that, then it takes the sting out of our c3 variation, and we lose 10 points. They gave us 40. We give 10 back. But it's a calculated risk because they only find it 4% of the time, and everything else is a bad move that goes from bad to worse really, really fast. d6. We're 63 points ahead. It quickly becomes 200 and 300 and 500 very fast. If they don't find very tricky, counterintuitive moves that nobody is finding. Okay, so we are playing c3 is our response. All right, let's get that on the board over here. So they go bishop e7, and we go c3. So we can see what's common on the left, and we can see what's powerful on the right, and we're putting these together. So d takes c3, 34% of the time, bad move. That is their worst of their three common moves. Gives us a score of 72 points ahead, and it's going to probably be 150 or more. Well, not 150, 140, 170 if they don't find another counterintuitive move. So we hit c3. d takes c3 is the most common. Let's look at d6 as well. It's also a bad move, and knight f6 is a bad move. All three of develop your piece toward the center and cover the middle are bad moves. The good move is move the same piece twice. So why is that rule we've been taught all our lives, don't move the same piece twice in the opening, failing here? Because it's a bad rule. It works the majority of the time, but it fails some of the time. And this line is where it fails. That's why I picked it. So I will change the rule. Should I tell it to you now or later? Let's just do it now. The rule shouldn't be don't move the same piece twice in the opening. The rule should be play the most powerful move in any given position, beginning, middle, or end, doesn't matter. Always play the most powerful move. Most of the time in the opening, the most powerful move is to move a piece that hasn't been moved yet, right? Mobilize your army. Get out a piece, get out another piece, get out another piece. So you're mobilized. Well, that works in theory, generally speaking, kind of. But chess is full of nuance. It's a game of nuance. The F7 square is being targeted. You can't just generally develop to protect it. You have to develop specifically to protect it. So the problem is the queen needs to be able to get to E7. The bishop needs to move. Actually, right here, as soon as we go C3, they need to go knight A5 and attack that bishop and shut down the attack on the F7 pawn by moving the same piece twice, because the F7 is particularly vulnerable in this specific position. So what is the most powerful move in a given position? It's the move that makes your position as powerful as possible and your opponent's position as weak as possible. And so the rule should be always play the most powerful move on the board. And then you got to figure out what the most powerful move is. And how do you figure that out? There's 1,000 different factors on figuring out what the most powerful move is. If that were easy to figure out, chess would be easy. But let's get rid of don't move the same piece twice, because it will make moves like knight A5 here invisible to you. And that will make you lose games like it does here. So C3. We attack it. They need to go knight A5. That only happens 4% of the time. 96% of the time, they don't see it. And the top three moves, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80-something points, 80-something percent of the time, they are going to play a bad move here. So we're going to cover the first of the bad moves, D takes C3 today. We take back knight takes C3. So let's catch up the map to that point. They go, let's see, knight A5, they don't do, they go taking, D takes C3, and that's the worst of the three. D takes C3, and now we do have queen D5 on the board, and we could play it. But let's look what the engine thinks, 57. And I went down that line pretty far and pretty deep to see if it was good or not. I mean, look how far we're going here to see, and at this point, those moves were not difficult for black to find, and yeah, their king position is disrupted in a target, but it's not easy to get into that target. We're lacking our dark squared bishop. They have one, and they can defend, and it's not hard to do, and we only have a lead of 50 points. Let's choose a lead of 150, 200, 300, 400. Our score is gonna skyrocket if they play natural, simple moves. We're not gonna go queen D5. We're not gonna go queen B3. The power move here is the subtle and dangerous knight takes C3. Knight takes C3 is still threatening queen D5, which they must deal with now. The problem is they also have queen B3, two threats, and there's only one response that addresses both threats simultaneously, and it's to move the same piece twice. Again, bishop to B4 frees up the queen to go to E7 and defend F7 if we go queen B3. It also deals with if I go queen D5, they can defend now, queen E7. Queen B4 is the move they need to make here, and let's see what the engine says. Bishop B4, sorry. Bishop B4 is the move they need to find here, and look, if they do that move, our score stays in the 70s, okay? But if they don't, we're jumping to 144 or 171 if they play these common moves. What else can they play to keep it down a little bit? King F8. How many of you would play King F8 here and forget castling for the rest of the game, and then try and defend that position and develop your rook and never make a slip up while your king's in the middle of the board? That's doomed to fail. So that's no good. Bishop B4 is it, or D6 or knight F6. Okay, and look, knight H6, a knight on the rim, is not as dim as it is on F6. Knight H6 is better than knight F6. You see, these principles we're taught work much of the time, but fail some of the time. So we need better principles. And so the better principle is a more broad statement. Okay, play the best move in every position, and then work on defining what that means, instead of give a rule that fails us a number of times and makes engine moves invisible to us. So D6, knight F6. Those two moves together are 89% of our opponent's responses. We're going to learn them and look at how awesome our score is now because they don't move the bishop a second time to B4. How often do they do that? 1%. 1% of the time. 1,500 times out of 112,000 games, they found bishop to B4. And That's by low-rated players, 1,500. They're violating the principle because they're low-rated. All the higher-rated players are following the principles and getting creamed. So I'm telling you, bishop b4 is the move here. Or I'm sorry, yeah, is the move for black here. And we're choosing this line because they're not going to find it. d6 is what they're going to play to protect against queen d5. All right, so they play d6. Enough of that. We have to play queen b3. Look what the engine says over here. Every other move puts black ahead if we don't play queen b3. That is our only good move. So we go queen b3, and that was our reason for c3. So our queen could go to b3. It wasn't just to attack the d4 pawn. So we go queen b3. And now we can see black's two common responses, knight a5 and bishop e6, to try and stop that capture on f7. King f8 is surprisingly there as a decent move, but again, you have to play with your king in the middle like a chess engine, like Stockfish, in order to avoid suffering the penalty of having your king in the middle. It's probably a bad move because we're not chess engines. Knight a5 is their best defense here. Bishop e6 is worse. They go knight a5, okay? And we pop off that f7 pawn check. And they can't go to d7 because you've got this queen d6 check, but that's not checkmate. They can go to c6, okay? Well, if they do mess up, which is rare, but it can happen. Let's just cover it real quick. We check them in the corner. If they go king to d7, we checkmate them with the knight e5. Just kidding, it's not checkmate, but now it is. So we put them in a checkmate that they can only get out of by taking our knight, and that makes the queen to e6 checkmate move actually be checkmate because now they're pawn moved and we're covering c6. So they cannot go king d7. They have to, and they can't take the bishop. They have one move that doesn't lose the game immediately, king f8. And then we go home. Let's follow it on here. Let's see here, knight a5, bishop takes check, king f8. Yep, and there's that checkmate in 2, 1000.02. That's how I code it. King b8. We don't have to go queen d1 home. We could go queen a4, but queen d1 is better. I explored that line, and this one's much better. We have less to learn, it's more tricky, and it's just as powerful. So why would we choose, if we have two engine lines to choose from, why would we choose the one that's easier for our opponent and harder for us to learn all the branching? So we're going to go queen d1 here. So we do queen d1, and now take a look at the engine scores. They need to go king f7. Everything else is worse, so they have to take that back. Or we'll back it off and preserve it, and it'll be worse for them. So we go queen d5 check, and now after that check, they took our bishop, we check them. Bishop e6 is their top engine move, moving the bishop there, blocking the check, and that sets up our knight g5 check later that's hard to see. A third time, we're making them violate opening principles in order to play this without losing. So bishop e6, 88% of the time, no other common moves. We can pretty much get almost full coverage by just learning that one response. And now we take their knight. So they go bishop e6, we take their knight. Now we could do queen h5 check here, but that just creates extra branches for us to learn for a tiny bit better score, but not really, because this one is more difficult to play correctly. People are not seeing that knight f6 followed by our check is as good if we go queen h6 check. So we're not going to do that one there. We're going to do this, not that top engine move. We're going to do this top engine move. Queen takes a5. So we took that knight. All right, now let's look what's common on the left over here. We've got knight f6, h6, and c6. Take a look, and then let's look at the scores on the right. Knight f6, look at how bad it is. They're 127 points behind if they play h6. That's their best move. 20% of the time they play it. But 43% of the time, almost half the time, they are not seeing that knight f6 is cutting off their bishops, and they're falling into routine of, I've already developed these, now I need to develop this so I can get castled and get castle manually and be safe. So they go knight f6, cutting off the defense of the g5 square, letting us check their king and take it. And you might think, man, these guys are amateurs. Take a look at these scores, 1880, and these ratings, 1888 is the average, which means some of them are lower and some of them are higher. And it's kind of an embarrassing thing to fall for, but knight f6 is what we're going to prepare for with this line. We'll cover the other lines another time. So they go knight f6. We're definitely going to pounce on knight g5 check. And before you say it's not it's intuitive, you wouldn't fall for that, only 56% of players playing white saw knight g5 check that wins a piece. That is the only reason that knight f6 is so bad. Okay, 479 points ahead we'll get if we go down that. If they play knight f6, let's look at it. We go knight f6, and now take a look at the scores. If we do knight g5 check, we're 472 points ahead. If we don't, we're 74 points ahead. So knight g5 is the reason knight f6 was garbage and not even considered in the top moves. We check them there. And now their king can go to 4 different squares. King g8 is the best. Let's catch it up over here. We check them, and we can see all of those different moves, all 4 of those moves that they can make, and their respective scores over here on the right. And we can see King g8 is the top engine move. It's 100 points better than the next best, and that one's 60 points better than the next one. And finally, King f8 is garbage because they lose their queen. So normally I would say, hey, I'm going to cover these another time. Let's focus on the most common one. But since this line is only 14 moves deep, and because they end soon. These lines end soon. I don't want to spend a whole video doing something that's going to end soon. So let's cover it in this one. And besides, we can get full coverage of this position without a lot of time put into it. So let's do it. And we'll do King g8 last. That's the one that's part of our line. Let's cover these exceptions, all right? And we'll do it from quickest to shortest. King f8. That loses instantly to the fork by our knight. Check, and now we win their queen. That's game over. So King f8 is garbage, and yet 5% of the time that got played with an average rating of 1748. All right, next on the chopping block is King e8. Well, that takes our lead from a bishop ahead to a rook ahead, because we're going to take that bishop, threatening their queen, and then we're going to take the pawn on c7, check, and win their rook with it, and then they can take our knight, and now we're up a rook. But you might say to me, yeah, but and they could go queen d7, and we take that check. You might say, yeah, but they don't have to go queen d7. They could go b6 right here, and now you don't have that. Well, yeah, I do. I check them on the light squares. They block with their queen, and then you might think, well, we'll trade queens and then take it, and then it won't work because the king moved when it took the queen back. But no, we could do it before. Check, right there. The queen's pinned. Can't take the knight. They have to move their king. We take their queen. And then they take back, and then we take their rook, and now we're a rook ahead. So King e8 just takes our lead from a bishop ahead to a rook ahead. So they can't go to e8. They can't go to f8. What's left? g8, that'll be our line, and g6. G6 is beautiful. You know, that one's the most common other than our main line, 35% versus 33%. So let's take a look at King g6. This one's beautiful. Yes, we can take their bishop. Yes, it attacks their queen. Yes, everyone who got in this position as a white did it. They had an average rating of 1912. There were 26 games, all 26 took. That's not the dominant move. 92 is. It's so cool. All right, so their king is cut off from going back to f7. So their king is restricted to these squares over here. Bringing our knight to e2 is threatening a knight to f4 check. Look at how devastating knight to f4 check is. And before you think their king can take our knight, pay attention to our queen on the other side of the board, covering the entire 5th rank. Also pay attention to our bishop on c1, on the dark squares, covering g5. Those two together can deliver a checkmate in a number of lines. So, yeah, we didn't take the free bishop when they stepped forward with their king. We're going to get that bishop with interest, or we're going to checkmate him. And much of the time, it's going to be checkmate. I don't know that because there's no games here to prove that. But you tell me. You look down this line with me, all right? So we go knight e2. We are threatening knight c4 check. And if you start counting all the squares they can go to, knight f4 check covers h5, covers the square they're on. They can't come out here. They can't go back. They only have one move, knight to h6. And then both knights can quickly move off this dark diagonal, and we can checkmate him with the queen. And we can do so with checks. So if we check them on c4, they go to h6. Here, let's see, knight e2. Well, we'll start going over some of the moves here. So we go knight e2. It's so good. They cannot move that bishop. They're going to lose it anyway, even if they play optimally. They can't defend it because they will lose. What they need to do is block this 5th rank. They need to go c5. They need to go d5. Even bishop to d5, sack the bishop. Get our queen to stop covering the 5th rank is their only way to not lose. So knight e2 is a much better way to handle their king g6 to end the game instantly. Let's take a look at some of the variations, all right? Let's say they do not move their bishop. They protect it. Now we don't get it for free, but take a look at knight c4 check, okay? Again, our queen covers all that. They only have one escape square, king to h6. And now all we need to do is move these two knights and checkmate them with queen g5. So we come to here, check, they can take it. We move this knight with a check with our dark squared bishop. And now if they go king, no matter where they move their king, we got a checkmate at g5. And if they try and block it with the pawn, we still have the same checkmate at g5 and it's game. That's if they try and defend the bishop. Let's say they move the bishop. Well, that f5 square, the bishop's protecting the f5 square. If they move on this diagonal, going this way, and relinquish control of the f5 square, we've got the check with the queen, bringing them to h6. And now we can move the knight with check. And that's checkmate right there with a double check. And if they instead move their king to h5, we still have a discover check with our queen here, which again, they block. We checkmate with the queen. So that doesn't work. And so the bishop cannot stop covering f5. It needs to cover f5. It can't be defended. Let's say it backs off of, it continues to protect f5, but backs up so that they don't lose it. Well, again, that stops the coverage of f7. So we still have this knight check, and they have no square to go to but h6. And look at this beautiful checkmate here with the two knights. This knight here on c7 that the bishop is no longer covering because it stepped back to defend itself, that one covers the two dark squares. This knight covers the two light squares. All four squares are covered, and you got this beautiful checkmate with the knight. So this whole line is garbage. They shouldn't go to g6 when we check them here. So they need to go to g8. If they go g6, we're going to go knight e2. And then they have to play c5 or d5 to prevent nasty checkmates. So, and the likelihood of them seeing that is pretty darn slim, if you ask me. So, they don't want to go g6. All right, so now we're done with that tangent. We've covered all the places the king could go and how bad they all are. They need to go to g8. Okay, and that's 35% of the time. And now you're going to be able to win the game outright 65% of the time. Or get so much advantage that it'll be easy. All right, so let's see, where were we? Knight f6, knight g5 check. Yes, knight g5 check. Their king has to move back to g8. All right, so that's our line, knight to king to g8. Let's follow that one. So here's the top engine scores at that point. You can see all their scores. You can see e5 is the second best move here. Knight takes e6 is the best because their bishop's hanging, of course. Okay. Queen d7, that is their top engine move, and it's going to happen 92% of the time. Why do we bother looking at anything else? We're going to just play queen d7 and learn that line. And now knight f4. Top engine move. I went down these other ones and looked at all of their answers and all the answers to those and went pretty deep and wide in every single one of these up to that one right there. So all those, knight f4 is best. Go knight f4. So when they attack that knight, back off to f4. That's your best square. All right, and now we're at the end of the line with 5 games, and we're almost out of data. And I'm going to show you B6. B6 is the most likely with our small data set. We need a bigger sample space to know for sure whether B6 is going to be the dominant move, but it should at least be a common move. It looks very intuitive to me, and it happened twice in the 5 games. So they play B6. So we're going to continue from here. Queen B4. Again, I mapped all of these very, very deep, very, very wide, and very, very carefully, and Queen B4 is the best. Queen b4 is counterintuitive because we're attacking, we're putting pressure on all the squares that they're strong on, the dark squares. They have a dark squared bishop, all their pawns are on dark squares, the white squares are weak. Why aren't we moving our queen to a light square? We could, it's not as strong. We're going to threaten to move to the light squares at a moment's notice. We have command of them. Our knights are covering them. We don't have a light squared bishop, but they don't either, and our knights are covering them. And we are threatening that if they try and mobilize this queenside pawn majority, the only advantage they have, if they try to mobilize that, we're going to punish them by very carefully checking everywhere we could place our queen using an engine and deciding on b4. So let's look at some of the common responses we might expect to see. All right. So let's look at the most obvious, d5. All right. They play d5, attacking our queen with their bishop, hoping we don't see it. The problem with that is queen b3. Queen b3 pins that, and we got 4 pieces on it, and they only have 2 defenders. And we're just going to win a pawn. So that's garbage. What else might they try? Let's see. A5. How many people strike out when they see a queen and they can attack it, so they strike out? A lot of people do that. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It's a very random way to play chess. So they play A5. The problem with A5 is queen c4 check. Now we jump on the light squares. Okay. And now that they have pushed that pawn, their extra weak, their whole queenside pawn majority can't move forward without their c pawn going forward to help push them forward. They've now weakened their light squares, and we can now jump into all those spots very, very well. And we start with this check that forces them to either go king f8. Let's see, queen c4 check. Take a look at these scores here. King f8 or d5. d5, again, just loses a pawn. There goes their queenside pawn majority. And king f8 lets us drop in right there, knight e6 check. We seize control and cement a pawn in there, and we halt the entire queenside from advancing. Their only counterplay is gone. So a5's no good. h6 or g6. So they're trying to get their king out so they can get their rook out. Very natural moves, and I think it's likely they play it. g6. So back that up. a5. They try g6. Queen b3 check. Nasty. Queen c4 check was the second best, and yet surprisingly the one that's further back is actually better. Farther back. And I didn't bother going to figure out why. Just one more move is good enough. We capture that long diagonal. We can still drop our knight onto e6. Our other knight goes into nice juicy squares. And now that they played g6, they opened up this dark square diagonal that our bishop can go to. So once we drop that knight into e6, we also have bishop h6. If they don't bring their king bring their king forward, we're going to go bishop h6, and we're going to infiltrate their position here pretty well. The problem is their king is trapped in the corner, the rook's behind that, and pushing either one of the pawns lets our pieces in. And so the engine's saying don't push either pawn, and yet those are very intuitive moves, which is again why I chose this line with the queen b4 move. Let's see here. Queen b3 check. If they do g6. Okay. h6. I don't usually do this, but since it's at the end of the line and there's no more data and we're not going to cover this, and it looked like I could do this and still keep the time limit not too long, I wanted to cover these. All right, so they go h6. I put those into the mapper just to glance. I was pretty sure they weren't as good as queen to c4, and sure enough. Queen c4 check. And you're also putting pressure on c7. So if they go h6, you got this check here, and you're going to infiltrate the light squares, and they weaken their light squares further. Our knight is now able to go to g6 if it wants. They're weakening their position here. So queen c4 is how we respond to that. And is that all of them? g6, h6, d5, a5, c6. Okay, last one. They might think, well, I don't like these holes, and I want to mobilize, without creating holes, so I need to go c6 so that I don't have any holes, and then I can try a5 and whatnot. So c6, the problem with c6 is queen b3 check, again, those light squares. And then their top engine move is to go d5. If they go king f8, it gets even worse, because again, we infiltrate their position. You'll have to figure out how from here if they don't play d5 and they try something else like king f8. That one fails, but I haven't mapped it. Here, I'll expand that for later. Throw that in an engine and see how to punish king f8. But d5 we can quickly punish with just trading down on that. They just drop a pawn, so that doesn't help. So their queen side can't be mobilized. They can't push the pawns to get their king out. The rook is trapped. They're bound up. This is a fantastic position to end on, and we end it with queen b4. And that's the end of the line. And thank you. Till next time.